लाइव है सर.
Okay, well, hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Harsh Pratap Singh, and today we will try to start a series to cover the 100, around 100, 120 most probable topics for CLAT 2026. We will, in today's session, that I hope should last around 2 hours, try to cover some key international organizations, some key developments with respect to sports in India, and then some key personalities in the news and news developments relating to art and culture and history. Right, this probably is going to be a three-part series wherein I hope to cover around 30 to 35 topics in a particular session, so that, as promised at the beginning, we can cover around 100, 120 most probable topics in around three sessions, right? So I hope that if you derive some value, if today's session helps you, aids you in your preparation, you're going to come back for the next two sessions of this series. Okay, so rather than having, I would say, a very static approach to these topics, wherein I would simply read from the screen and ask you to memorize these points, I wish to have a more candid discussion with respect to what are some of the key areas with respect to each of these topics that are relevant for you to understand and cover, and then what related aspects should one expect to see questions from, right? So rather than this being a session in learning, it's going to be more a session in strategy, where we will try to see how to very smartly in these last few days, in this final week of your preparation, cover each of these topics, what to pay attention to, what to skip, how to make cross connections, how to relate one topic with another, and what kind of questions to expect in the actual examination. All right, so as you can see on this board here, there are several tabs opened, and they do not necessarily correspond to a distinct topic in themselves. So for example, the first international organization that I have to discuss with all of you is UNESCO, an organization that almost everybody at least would have heard of once or more in their lifetimes, right? But the reason why we are discussing UNESCO is not because anything particularly important with respect to its organizational structure has happened. We are discussing this because this year, around three major developments with respect to certain lists maintained by UNESCO. These developments happened, these developments occurred, right? So I just want to give you an idea as to how this discussion is going to flow. We are going to first understand the basics about UNESCO, and then I'm going to task you with sort of focusing on certain important aspects, retaining that information, memorizing them, and if your time allows, maybe even making very concise notes on those topics, right? And then after we've covered the various aspects that were in the news with respect to an organization like UNESCO, we're going to move on to the next set of international organizations, right? So this is how I wish to proceed, and I think we should now start. All right. So first international organization that is of utmost relevance this year, because if you go by the previous year's question papers pattern, you will see that there certainly is going to be a passage on international relations, right? It could either be on some major war or conflict that is happening somewhere, but given that the consortium has already asked you questions on the Russia Ukraine conflict as well as the Israel Hamas conflict, right? So we hope to see a passage and questions either relating to some international convention that is in the news, right? And I'm talking about general knowledge and current affairs. Similar trend could be followed in the legal reasoning section as well, right? Or it's going to be about some international organization and various lists and indices that it maintains, something of that sort. Okay. So UNESCO, what kind of a body is it? It is a specialized agency of the United Nations, right? Now, under the aegis of the United Nations, system, there are several organizations that function under that broader umbrella of United Nations, right? But the major difference between them is that some of them find mention in the UN Charter itself, and these bodies are then called the principal organs of United Nations, whereas there are these other bodies that work in tandem, that work in sync, right, that work in partnership with the United Nations and under the broader aegis and umbrella of the United Nations, right? So these kinds of agencies are called specialized agencies that are tasked with certain specific functions. And as the name itself indicates, UNESCO is the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization, right? Emphasis being laid on the word cultural because the three items, the three related current affairs that we're going to discuss are with respect are related to cultural developments and cultural, I would say, topics of importance, right? Now, I don't think this remaining introduction is of much relevance. You should simply refer to all the basic information that is condensed and summarized in this introductory Wikipedia, schedule of UNESCO. Say, for example, the nature of this body is that it is a specialized agency. Please note, it is not a principal organ of the United Nations. Thereafter, where is the headquarters? Since it deals with culture, right? You can think of Paris again, according to at least Western standards, the cultural capital of the world. So therefore, headquarters are in Paris, right? I don't think the director general and the other officials of this organization are important, because if there had been a new appointment, maybe, but since nothing with respect to their appointment or functioning was in the news, I don't think this is really important. Okay, so the introduction, I think this should suffice. What is it called? What is its brief, broad functions? You can briefly read from the introduction here and just note down these points, right? So this is where you can expect questions under the general knowledge head of things from. Moving on, you then see the news items relating to UNESCO. The most prominent one and the most recent one also, I believe, is that Lucknow has been added to the creative cities list of UNESCO for rich and diverse culinary heritage. Okay, so we know that UNESCO maintains something called the creative cities list, right, where owing to the heritage of cities, and these heritage, this heritage could be relating to gastronomy, that is the culinary heritage, or it could be related to literature, or could be related to music, or even movie making as an art form. So this creative cities list already has certain Indian cities, listed, but the most recent addition, that is, this news that this news item is talking about, is Lucknow, which has been added to this list, and the reason it has been added is because of its culinary heritage. Okay, so very simple current affair 1 mark question in ALET as well as under a passage in CLAT can be expected here. uh, the designation places Lucknow among 70 gastronomy cities worldwide, cities that are renowned for their, food heritage, and makes it the second Indian city to win the title after Hyderabad. Okay, so let me task you with the with with the question that, how many Indian cities are already listed on the United Nations Creative Cities Network, and for what aspect of their heritage are they so recognized? Okay, so please remember this. If you get a passage on UNESCO or maybe this news item, you should already know the other cities that are there on on UNESCO's Creative Cities Network. Okay, next. Again, this is from October 12th, 2025. UNESCO's new virtual museum of stolen cultural objects has been unveiled, right? So, understanding what is this virtual museum, what kind of stolen artifacts or items have been listed on this website, and again, why in general does it matter? Okay, so for understanding that, I would simply read from this select portion of this article. Yes. The museum depicts at least two objects submitted from India, right? So just remember that if a question gives you, it tries to trick you into maybe marking that maybe one of the most renowned stolen items from India, that happens to be the Kohinoor, right? that Kohinoor is listed on this network, on this online platform, please mark it as false, right? So it is just saying the museum depicts at least two objects submitted from India, which is a ninth century sandstone sculpture from Mahadev temple in Pali, Chhattisgarh, and also a Nataraja figure, right? Along with the figure of Brahma. So these are lesser known, sculptures from India that have been reported. One can expect, trick question of the likes that I just mentioned. That maybe it includes, things like the Kohinoor diamond or the peacock throne, which was taken from India. But these statements are going to be necessarily false. Also, just remember that when we talk about stolen items, we really do not consider items taken by our colonial masters, right? Along with them when they left India to be really stolen items. For a sculpture, for any uh, I would say any object that is considered culturally important, for it to be called stolen and to be considered stolen, it must necessarily be taken away by way of theft, right? It must necessarily be taken away from a temple or from its original place of storage by theft and not by force as was done by our colonial masters. Okay, so this should help you differentiate between what kind of objects one should expect to see in this virtual museum and what kind of objects should not be expected, right? Also, just read this part. This digital museum currently displays almost 240 missing objects from around 46 countries, a number that is expected to grow, but interestingly also eventually fall. This is because the museum aims to gradually empty itself as the objects are recovered and returned to their countries of origin, right? So if something has been stolen, there are very high chances that the current status of those heritage items, those cultural objects, would not be very well known, right? Maybe they have gone for sale in in the underground black market. But necessarily the first step involved is to identify, to locate where these objects are currently, and then of course to later on recover them, right? So this is UNESCO's virtual museum of stolen cultural objects. All right. Next, I have opened this Wikipedia page of the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites in India, right? And this is a very important development because this year there has been an addition in this list, right? By way of incorporating the Maratha military landscapes of India, right? So as you could see, 2025 finally the Maratha military landscapes of India, which India for a very long time had wanted to be inducted in this very wanted UNESCO World Heritage Sites list. This has been done. Previously, it was in the tentative sites list. Now it is in the final UNESCO World Heritage Sites list. Right now, what is important about these, this particular landscape, the Maratha military landscapes? You should know that there are 12 forts that together make up the Maratha military landscapes of India, out of which 11 are in Maharashtra and only one is in Tamil Nadu. So necessarily that begs the question, what's the name of that one fort, Maratha fort, that is in Tamil Nadu, that is inducted in the UNESCO World Heritage Sites as part of Maratha military landscapes, right? So if you just open this link or any other primary source of information on the Maratha military landscapes, just go through the names of these forts very quickly, right? You don't have to very, I would say, categorically memorize each and every name on this list. But if you just go through it once, some of these names you would have already probably heard: Lohagad, Khanderi, Raigad, Rajgad, Pratapgad, Suvarnadurg, Vijayadurg, Sindhudurg, very famous. And also the one fort in Tamil Nadu, that is the Jinji fort. Okay, so if you have just gone through these names maybe once or twice, there's a high probability that in case you get a question like, which of the following forts is not a part of the Maratha military landscapes, you would identify that option upon reading, the options, and will be able to eliminate and finally mark the correct option as the answer, right? So this is important. And because there has been an addition in the UNESCO World Heritage Sites list of India, uh, again, another kind of question that can be asked is, what is India's rank in terms of, the number of sites that are listed in the UNESCO World Heritage Sites list, right? So which country in the world has the highest number of sites, right? Answer would be Italy, right? What is India's rank? Okay. Similarly, how many sites are there? UNESCO World Heritage Sites are there in India in total, right? Which sites were the first ones to be inducted in this very, I would say, wanted list? So you would see, let me just very quickly scroll to the top. Right? The first sites to be inducted in the UNESCO World Heritage List were the Ajanta Caves in 1983 along with Ellora Caves. Okay, then in the same year, it's easy to remember certain places of importance in Agra, right? So you have the Agra Fort, you have Taj Mahal, and that's that, right? So four sites at the beginning: Ajanta and Ellora, and the Agra Fort along with Taj Mahal. So one can memorize it this way. And then proceeding down further, you should also have at least some idea about the kind of places that are inducted in this list. So if you read the introduction of this page, you will see, or if you look at this map, for instance, you will see that India has around, just a second. Yes, that after this addition, the total number of sites, World Heritage Sites in India is 44. Out of these, 36 are categorized as cultural and 7 are categorized as natural. So, what's easier to remember for you is memorizing the 7 natural World Heritage Sites of India, right? So, again, whenever you have any such, extensive piece of information in front of you, which seems very daunting, which seems like, one cannot easily memorize each of these, facts and each of these places. One cannot memorize, of course, certainly everything that is given in the schedule, especially in this last leg of your preparation. Try memorizing things randomly from here and there in this very table. So, for example, I looked at the first few sites that were designated as World Heritage Sites. Then probably I will focus on the 7 natural sites. Then I will focus on the one mixed site, and then I will try to at least go through 10 or 12 cultural sites. So, in case I get any question in an exam like CLAT, I should be able to do those very important deductions and very important eliminations to arrive at the right answer, right? But one should not expect getting a question from, such an extensive list just randomly from anywhere. If something was in the news, highest probabilities they'll ask you a question on the Maratha military landscape. इससे रिलेटेड जो जीके का टॉपिक बन जाता है वो यही बन जाता है कि फर्स्ट साइट्स कौन सी हैं, राइट? और आप इससे आगे बढ़कर एक चीज और देख सकते हो, that okay, this year this Maratha military landscape has been added, but even before that, just very recently, last year, Moidams, that are mound burial systems of the Ahom dynasty in Assam, were also added to this list, right? So आप ऊपर से 4-5 एंट्रीज याद कर सकते हैं, फिर बीच में से 2-3 एंट्रीज पे आप फोकस कर सकते हैं, and then towards the end of this list you can focus on the latest additions, right? Along with the World Heritage Sites list, UNESCO also maintains something that is called the tentative list. Now, what is the tentative list? Before a site is accepted by the UNESCO committee as being of international significance, international heritage significance, right? Countries nominate certain sites that they wish to be considered for UNESCO World Heritage status, and then they are placed in the tentative list, right? So there are certain sites, say for example, temples at Bishnupur in West Bengal, that have been listed since 1998 in this tentative list, but have not yet been able to make it to the final list, right? So this is not as important as the main list, but even with respect to the tentative list this year, certain entries have been added. So if you have that kind of, I would say, memorizational acumen, and if you really are interested in these kinds of current affairs, you should also additionally just focus on these final sites. As you can see, Kangar Valley National Park, Mudumal megalithic menhirs, serial nomination for Ashokan edict sites along the Mauryan routes, etc., etc., right? So just visit this list and you will see that this year several sites actually have been added to UNESCO's tentative list, right? So make sure that at least you go through this once. If you can't memorize this per se, no problem at all. You can proceed further, and that will be sufficient, I would say, right? Then this, I think, is sufficiently comprehensive for an organization like UNESCO and the kind of activities that it performs. After you have covered this, the next major international organization slash um establishment that was in the news is this body called Swift. So first and foremost, you should memorize its full form. You should understand that what is the nature of this body, right? It stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, right? You don't have to memorize this per se, but you just have to read it to understand the true nature of this body. I'll say this again. Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, that is Swift. So staying true to its name, what does it do? It basically plays the role of the main messaging network that banks located in different countries use in order to ensure that there is that there is correct, accurate, and timely payment or transfer of funds between the banks. Okay, so it is essentially a messaging network that is used by the banks located in various countries, in different countries, to ensure that there is timely payment and there is timely verification of that payment and transfer of funds between the banks. Okay, now what are the basic facts related to it? First and foremost, it is, and this stands out as an important aspect, right? The nature of this company is that it is, the nature of this organization is that it is a cooperative society, right? It is an international cooperative society, which is headquartered at a place called La Hulpe in Belgium. Okay, so again, not a very well-known place, right? Probably some of you would be hearing about this for the first time. So it's a cooperative society, the core purpose of which is to serve as a messaging network for banks to confirm and to ensure timely payment and timely transfer of funds and resources, headquartered in La Hulpe in Belgium. Now, why was this in the news? It was in the news for two primary reasons, right? It remains in the news for two primary reasons. One is that this body is time and again criticized or is alleged of being used as a sanctioning mechanism by the US, right? So, weaponization of an organization like SWIFT is a very challenging area or a very challenging discussion in the international arena, primarily because there is no denying the fact that the US has used this SWIFT messaging network to, in fact, sanction various countries, including Russia, by denying their banks, the services that they were otherwise entitled to. Okay, so in response to the misuse or rather the abuse of this organization by a country like the US and its allies, you will see that the BRICS countries have started suggesting something that's called BRICS Pay. Okay, so this is the next body that you should be aware of. BRICS Pay, it seems to provide an alternative to countries that are currently relying on the SWIFT network by being a decentralized and independent payment messaging mechanism system, which of course is affiliated by the BRICS countries, right? So currently we're living in an era where, in order to challenge the unilateral hegemony or dominance of the US and its allies, and in today's time, to be very honest, just the US, the BRICS countries are coming together more than ever to provide alternatives to the other countries of the world that are sick and tired of this American hegemony, right? One of the offerings that they have is, of course, BRICS Pay, that gives them the benefit of these points. Just let's read from here. The purpose of BRICS Pay is to make international payments more safe, transparent, less costly, and less complicated, encouraging international cooperation between the quickly expanding BRICS members. Okay, you would have also read about the idea of introducing a BRICS currency to challenge the hegemony, the economic hegemony of the US dollar this year, right? So earlier this year. This was in the news again and again, and Mr. Trump had to actually give out a verbal threat, a written threat on Truth Social and Twitter to dissuade BRICS countries from entertaining the idea of introducing that BRICS currency. Right? So these things are interrelated, they remain in the news. And now that we're discussing BRICS Pay, let's also very quickly jump to the BRICS group of countries. Okay, here. Now, why is this relevant? It's relevant because in 2026, India is going to host the BRICS summit. In 2023, we had hosted the G20 summit, and you all are aware how important, how big a deal it was for us. So you can imagine that 2026, when India hosts the BRICS summit, it's going to be a it's going to be a very important, event for India to handle and to project itself to the world, right? It's also important because in recent years, the membership of BRICS has expanded from the traditional BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to include other developing economies from across the world as well, right? And if you find it challenging to memorize which countries essentially are the new members of BRICS, you should simply look at this map and try to memorize them in combinations, right? So you had Brazil, you had Russia, you had India, you had China, and you had South Africa. In fact, South Africa was also a later addition, as some of you would be aware. It initially just was BRIC. South Africa joined later on, and for a good decade or so, BRICS remained, the mouthpiece of the developing world. And now it has expanded its membership to these other countries. Just memorize it in this manner. Two countries from Africa, that is Egypt and Ethiopia, have joined in. Then two countries from the Middle East, that is Iran and the United Arab Emirates, UAE. And then India's maritime neighbor across the Bay of Bengal, that is Indonesia. These are the 10 members of BRICS today, and therefore it is more appropriate to refer to this organization as rather BRICS Plus, right? Because it denotes that these other five countries are also equal members of this international forum, right? That we now call BRICS Plus. Okay. Uh, Right. So you should read about BRICS from this introduction. I think Wikipedia pages of at least the key international organizations are authoritative enough. They are error free, right? I've gone through them and I can vouch for that. So the introductory parts of each of these organizations that we're going to cover in today's session, I would expect you after this session ends to sort of go through them, right? And again, the condensation of all those material facts and information would be here in this box that lists down all the essential facts about BRICS right here. Right. So this is the membership, the current chairman. Of course, since Brazil hosted the 2025 BRICS summit, right? You should note that 2025 summit was conducted successfully by Brazil, and therefore the presidency was with the president of the country. Right. Moving on, rather going back to the organizations that we were covering, right? So we have now covered UNESCO, the various lists of UNESCO. We have covered the SWIFT telecommunication network for banking systems. We have covered BRICS Pay, and we've also very quickly just covered BRICS grouping of countries, right? From here, we move on to FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. And to be honest, there's just two or three important things that one needs to understand and memorize with respect to FATF. First and foremost, what kind of an organization is it? Right? It's not simply a forum for discussion like BRICS, right? It is a permanent intergovernmental organization, which means it's going to have a headquarters, which means it's going to have its own staff, right? So the headquarters of FATF are again in Paris. Okay. It was formed in 1989. The initial purpose was to combat money laundering, but post 9/11, it also started focusing equally on prohibiting terror financing. Right. So FATF, there are two core purposes: prohibiting money laundering, at least when it comes to cross country money laundering as well as terror financing, right? We know that FATF maintains two lists, informally called the blacklist and the gray list, that indicate to the world the nature of legal strictness, or the nature or the level of legal conformity that certain jurisdictions allow to people who are engaged in money laundering or terror financing. That is, if a country finds itself unfortunately in the blacklist, it's an indication that the laws of the country and the government of the country are incapable of preventing money laundering and terror financing, right? And that is a major red flag for any investor who may be thinking of, investing or giving a loan to such a country or even a company in that country, in that jurisdiction, right? So therefore, FATF, you will see, does not have universal membership. It's not like the UN that it has, membership of at least all recognized nation states. It has a limited membership of 40 countries, and you should remember India is also a part of FATF, right? But these 40 countries and the staff of FATF are powerful enough, are active enough, are rather proactive enough of maintaining these two lists that are called, as I was mentioning, the black or gray lists informally. Now let's see what are they called formally, and what's this FATF blacklist all about, and which countries are part of it. Okay, so officially, the FATF blacklist, you should remember, this makes for a wonderful one marker question in any exam. It's called the call for action list, right? So if a country finds itself in this list already, FATF is indicating to, people around the world that now it's time for action. We must actively, if not sanction, but at least isolate these countries and prevent any funding from entering in these jurisdictions, right? So the blacklist is formally called call for action, and you will see that it has the following countries listed under this blacklist. Just allow me a moment. Right. So most recently, just a second. Yeah, this is the gray list. My bad. Yes. So currently, there are just three countries, three jurisdictions that are included in the FATF blacklist, which, that indicates a no-go for investors, and these are Iran, North Korea, and Myanmar. Right? Of course, the nature of the polities of these countries you're very well aware. The nature of the relationship with the Western world you're very well aware. Right? Iran, North Korea, and Myanmar. Sometimes they try to trick you by, placing statements like, was Pakistan included in the FATF's blacklist, right? So at a time when Pakistan was in the gray list, now it has been, removed from that list. They used to ask such questions that, true or false, is Pakistan a part of the blacklist maintained by FATF? So that was never the case, right? Only three countries, just remember: Iran, North Korea, and Myanmar. And then the gray list is, far more extensive. Pakistan no longer is there, but you will see major countries like Algeria. You will see countries in our neighborhood, Nepal, countries like Vietnam and Venezuela, that still are in the gray list. No need to memorize all these countries. Just look for countries that are of some relevance for India, right? So Nepal, Vietnam, Namibia, and Algeria, maybe these kind of countries, and that's going to be all, right? Previously, even countries like Philippines and UAE used to feature in this list, but they were removed. Okay, so how does this, inclusion and removal from these two lists happen? Well, countries need to act, and they need to demonstrate that they are doing enough, both legislatively and in terms of enforcing their laws, that they're doing enough to prevent money laundering and terror financing in their territories, right? So if they are able to convince the, FATF committee of their actions and their intentions, then they can be removed from these two lists. Okay, so that's for FATF. Moving on, there was this major news this year that India has signed this free trade agreement with this European grouping, this European regional association called European Free Trade Association, EFTA. Right now, it's not the European Union that we're talking about. We're talking about European Free Trade Association. That's a different grouping. Okay, and in fact, two distinct European nations, associations or groupings were in the news for the same reason, that India was either negotiating an FTA with them or had entered into an FTA with them. Right. So here, first and foremost, you have the European Free Trade Association, the body that has been mentioned here in this news item. Right. The European Free Trade Association, it's easy to remember, it just has four member countries. Right, one of them is Iceland, then you have Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. Right, so two countries from Western Europe, Central Western Europe, that is Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Then two countries that are technically Nordic countries, Northern European countries, Iceland and Norway. Right, so since India has signed an FTA with these countries, it's important for you to remember it just has four member countries. Right, and it's not the European Union that we're talking about. Okay, the secretariat, interestingly, is at three places: Geneva, Brussels, and Luxembourg City. But I don't think this is really as important for an exam like CLAT. Just remember the member countries. That should be all. And of course, it goes without saying that for all the all the topics that are discussed today, all the bodies and associations, organizations that are discussed today, please just go through the introduction once. Don't focus on memorizing anything. Just try making sense of what's written and try placing it against the other kind of groupings that we are discussing today. Right, so try making those cross connections. That's all one expects of you. Next, you have another regional association, not strictly European but Eurasian. It's called the Eurasian Economic Union. uh, and it has the following five member countries: Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. Okay, so it's maybe slightly less important than EFTA, but while you are at it, I don't think it does any harm if you just look at these maps and sort of try memorizing that. Okay, if the body is called Eurasian Economic Union, it only makes sense that these Eurasian countries will be part of it. Right, so always remember that if in an exam like CLAT or ALET, the topic that they are asking questions from itself is a very challenging or a very, uh, I would say, opaque topic, right? A less discussed topic, because CLAT has a tendency of asking questions from those areas that have been widely discussed both nationally and internationally, right? So, be it the president's election, be it the FIFA World Cup, be it the war between Russia and Ukraine, things like that, right? So nationally and internationally important themes are the most, I would say, important areas for an exam like CLAT. But and in the questions that they ask under those passages, they can maybe ask slightly remotely related issues, topics from slightly remotely related issues, topics from bodies like these. Right, so if the question is from an area that is in itself challenging, you should expect there to be some leniency in the options. What I mean by that is that if the topic is challenging, the question is going to be easy. If the topic itself is easy, right, it is a very widely discussed topic, say for example Operation Sindoor, then the questions are not going to be so easy to answer. Right, so always remember that they're not going to make your lives so miserable by asking you extremely challenging questions at all levels, right, at all fronts. They're going to ask you questions that may seem daunting or challenging at first, but would be really easy to answer if you just apply your mind in that situation. Say, okay, it's Eurasian Economic Union, and if they've given Italy as one of the options, you can very simply eliminate and sort of deduce the correct answer. Right, so they're not going to make questions that are so difficult at all the levels that one would find it extremely difficult and challenging to answer those questions. That's not going to be the case. Just remember this thumb rule: if the topic seems difficult, the question is likely to be easy. And if the topic seems easy, and this would be the case even under the legal reasoning section, the questions are going to be slightly they have to be dealt with more carefully, is my suggestion to you. Okay, so this is the Eurasian Economic Union, and it has 5 member countries: Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. Moving on, the G20 summit has recently been conducted, has recently been successfully hosted, and this was hosted by South Africa in Johannesburg, right? But the reason why it was in the news wasn't for the successful hosting of the G20 summit. It was for irking the United States, maybe in the wrong manner. So much so that if you search for G20 right now on Google, the most recent news item that you will see is that the US has denied invitation to South Africa in the next year's G20 summit that will be hosted by the United States, right? So it's going to be challenging for these countries, that not necessarily are developed. It's the world's biggest forum of the world's 20 most important slash biggest economies, right? Not all of them are developed. Some of them are developing, like, of course, South Africa and India. So this schism between India, between Brazil, China, Russia, the developing world, and the developed countries is going to widen further, at least until Mr. Trump is in office. That's the expectation, right? So it is in that light, it is in the shadow of the uh, I would say the rule of somebody like Mr. Trump, that these events are happening, and therefore one can make sense of what to expect, even in the kind of declarations that these summits come out with, or that they finally agree upon, right? So after this session ends, I forgot to mention in the introduction itself that in the description of this session you will see there's a Google form link that you need to maybe register yourselves in. And after you've done that, we will be mailing you not just, of course, these links, but also elaborate notes. Let me show you how they look like. Yeah. So these kinds of elaborate, notes that will be in 3 sets, and we will cover them in our sessions in reverse. So the most recent ones are more important, and the older ones are relatively less important. So you'll see, files like these. The index will be there along with elaborate notes on each of these topics, right? So we will mail these sort of documents and the link to these, Google documents to people who register themselves on the Google form link that we are sharing below, right? So for those of you who register, along with these Google documents, the links to these documents, we will also be sharing the links of all these articles that I am referring to for today's session. Okay, so proceeding further, I would expect you to maybe read this yourself: Africa, climate, debt, sustainability, and UNSC reform. 10 key takeaways from the G20 leaders' declaration this year, right? So this, please read yourself. This is very recent. In fact, this is so recent that maybe some of you who would have stopped reading the newspaper post maybe around 20th of November, right? This was in the news right at that time, right? So around the time when people stopped reading the news, this is from that time period. Okay. Uh, Basics of G20, of course, we can cover, right? Just look at this table and look at the map of the world, and you should be able to memorize G20 countries very, very easily. Just remember, it's a misnomer. It's not a group of 20 countries. It's a group of 19 countries and 2 regional associations. One regional association is the European Union. The other regional association is the African Union, that was inducted into G20 in 2023 when India was the host of the G20 session, right? So just look at all the major continents and think of all the major economies that come to your mind when you look at those continents, right? So if I say North America, of course, countries like Honduras, countries like Guatemala will not come to your mind. You will first and foremost think of the US, you will think of Canada, and you will probably also think of Mexico. right? So we're talking about the 20 biggest economies, and I'm telling you how to memorize them. The easiest way is to think, to go continent by continent and think of major economies from each of the continents, right? So similarly, when you come to South America, you probably wouldn't think of Chile or Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, etc. You will think of two major economies, that is Brazil and Argentina, correct? Similarly, in Africa, only South Africa is an economy that is capable enough to call itself among the 20 most important economies of the world. But regardless, the remaining African continent today is represented by the African Union. That is something you guys should note, right? Moving on, if you look at Europe, you will have, of course, the United Kingdom. Let me zoom in further. Right. So you will have the United Kingdom, you will have France, you will have Germany, and you will also have Italy. Right. So these are the Western European countries of or economies of relevance to the world, and therefore they are inducted as members, as distinct members of the G20. Right. But here you also have one very interesting country that is not a member of G20 but is a permanent invitee as a permanent observer, and it is Spain. It's the only country in G20 that is a permanent invitee and not a member. So therefore, just remember it. The country is Spain. Okay. If you then move on to Asia, you will see that in the Middle East, Turkey and Saudi Arabia are members of G20. Iran, although major economy despite the sanctions, is not a member. Just remember that much. Then Russia would be there, China would be there, South Korea, Japan, India, Indonesia, and of course, Australia will be there, right? So these 19 countries together make up the G20, along with the two regional associations that are the European Union and the African Union. And Spain is the only country that is permanently invited. So this must be remembered, right? When was the G20 formed? You should know, in 1999, 26 years ago. And then in 2008, that is after the 2008 financial crisis, it became a more central forum because the member countries, themselves agreed, decided, and declared that going forward, G20 is going to be the central international organization for dialogue and discussion for everything relating to the world economy, right? So that is the centrality of G20, that anything that threatens the global economy, the stability of the global economy, then the 20 major economies, or rather the 19 plus 2 major economies together, would come, sit on the table and discuss the matter at hand via G20 rather than some other forum like the World Bank, the UN General Assembly, or some other forum, right? So that is the importance of G20. You should note the next G20 summit will be held in the United States in 2026. So G20 will be in the United States and BRICS will be in India. Just remember that much. And of course, please read the introduction. See what is the collective size, share, and might of these countries and regional associations. What percentage of the global economy and the global population do they collectively represent? So to have an idea as to the true placing of G20 amongst international groupings. Okay, we now move on to the next major international organization that remains in the news. In fact, this is just from uh, you know yeah, this I think was reported in the news recently, that Spain, or I think I have opened the incorrect link. Maybe I was trying to open some other link, but regardless, one day ago, news was that some other country has also joined ISA as its latest member. You don't have to memorize which countries have joined ISA. These news events are only going to be relevant for contextualizing, for making the International Solar Alliance important from a GK perspective, right? So what is this body and why is it important? It is important because in the first place, it's the idea of having something like an ISA, the International Solar Alliance, was mooted for the first time by India and France jointly. In fact, Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, is given ample credit for being the brain behind this idea of International Solar Alliance. Right now, which countries are eligible to become members? You should remember it's very easy. Countries that fall between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn are eligible to become members of the International Solar Alliance. It was founded at Paris in France, but its headquarters are right here in Gurgaon, right? So the headquarters of ISA are in India, therefore it's even more important, and not in New Delhi, right? Not in Mumbai. The headquarters are in Gurugram at the National Institute of Solar Energy. Okay, currently it has around 120 plus UN members, and the official languages are French and English. Current Director General is Mr. Ashish Khanna. President is India, co-president is France. Okay, that's the International Solar Alliance. Again, please read the introduction yourself. Moving on. Yes. Now this is from, I believe, a couple of months back. This is very recent. Just a second. Right. In fact, just a month back, India and Brazil agreed to expand scope of existing trade pact between India and Mercosur bloc. Okay, so this funny sounding international grouping is again a regional association of South American countries. And if you want, it just has 5 members, right? So membership is not an issue. And if your geography game is even slightly, strong, you would be able to identify these countries. But for the sake of your understanding, I would repeat: these countries are Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and you have Bolivia. Okay, so if this organization, I mean, if you get a question, my expectation is that the question would be not in CLAT but in ALET, because getting a passage, an entire passage on Mercosur seems like a far stretch, but getting one or two questions, direct questions in an exam like ALET is far more likely, right? Just remember the headquarters in capital city are in Montevideo and largest city is Sao Paulo. ओके अगेन जस्ट इसका तो आपको इंट्रोडक्शन भी नहीं पढ़ना है, इसको सिर्फ आप इस बॉक्स से पढ़ सकते हैं कौन से मेंबर्स है और कहां पर हेडक्वार्टर्स है, दैट्स ऑल. ओके, सो सिर्फ नाम से थोड़ा आइडिया लग जाना चाहिए. मर्कोसुर इज अ रीजनल एसोसिएशन ऑफ 5 साउथ अमेरिकन कंट्रीज दैट वी जस्ट डिस्कस्ड. ओके, moving on. I think we're almost done with the most important regional organizations and international organizations of relevance. Right, I'll share this link. You can read this yourself. How BRICS is chipping away at the Western order. But again, you can skip reading this. This is just to get a more holistic understanding of the BRICS versus the G7 construct. Okay, moving on. I think we're done with the international organizations that I wanted to cover with you guys through the primary sources that are, Wikipedia and in some cases newspaper articles. Right now, I have this map of uh, South and Southeast Asia open for all of us, right? And again, I cannot emphasize enough on how important it is to have some understanding of the relative position of countries vis-a-vis one another. So if you can mark the countries in South Asia, you would know that SARC is made up of which countries. Similarly, if you have an understanding of which countries are there in Southeast Asia, ASEAN gets unlocked for you, which is very important. Recently the summit was held, Mr. Modi did not attend it, right? And at the ASEAN summit, they finally added their 11th member country, that is East Timor. Okay, so I will give you some idea, right? I will not delve more deeply into the map that's visible to all of us and tell you which countries make up which international organization. I'll just give you some working idea. and then thereafter, I think by spending just about 5-7 minutes on each of these organizations, you can very easily cover them. Okay, now it goes without saying that ASEAN is one of the most important international organizations in the world, and also from a current affairs perspective every year, right? So when you're thinking of South Asia, you have, this landmass that also comprises of two islands that is referred to as South Asia, right? The westernmost country in this grouping is Afghanistan. Afghanistan के आगे फिर आप Middle East या Central Asia start कर लेते हो, right? So Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, then Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, right? Along with Maldives and Sri Lanka, this is the SAARC grouping, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. The headquarters are in Nepal. Easy to remember. पाकिस्तान में होता तो इंडिया नहीं मानता, इंडिया में होगा तो पाकिस्तान नहीं मानेगा, डिप्लोमैट्स को वीजा का इशू आता रहेगा ईयर ऑन ईयर, राइट? सो वी हैव देयरफॉर limited, therefore we have agreed on having the SAARC headquarters at Kathmandu in Nepal, right? Then, due to India's strategic decision of isolating slash boycotting Pakistan at international forum, we see that SAARC has lost its relevance today, right? SAARC is not as important an international grouping for India as it once used to be, because you know every meeting that one would expect to be conducted under the aegis of SAARC gets vetoed by the dispute between India and Pakistan. So therefore, in order to engage these neighboring countries, right? It's okay for us to think of BRICS, right? We have global aspirations. We are thinking of becoming the voice of the developing world along with these other, countries that are now part of BRICS. It's all right. We are engaging the world through different mediums. It's okay for us to be an active member of the G20 and having our aspirations as a global economy, right? But we must not forget about our neighbors also is one key, point. And therefore, in the absence of SAARC, right, which other international association should fill the gap for India to engage its neighbors, right? Because that is also a very important part of our foreign policy. We can't simply look at countries uh, from the lens of the interest that they serve for India, right? So you should know the other organization that is perhaps the most important for India to engage with its neighbors today is called BIMSTEC, right? BIMSTEC. And the full form of itself, the full form of BIMSTEC itself is a task for most people to memorize, to remember, right? So you will have to go through it maybe twice or thrice to remember it. It's the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral, Technical, not Technological, Technical and Economic Cooperation, right? So BIMSTEC grouping of countries includes the following nations, and if this map is clearly visible to you, it's very easy to memorize. You just look at the Bay of Bengal and you look at the littoral states, right? Countries that lie along the coast of Bay of Bengal, and you will see that you have Sri Lanka, you have India, you have Bangladesh, you then have Myanmar, which is not part of South Asia but rather Southeast Asia, and you also have Thailand, right? So these countries that surround the Bay of Bengal, along with Nepal and Bhutan, because to the north of Nepal and Bhutan lies the mighty Himalayan range. So it is in their good interest also that the Bay of Bengal remains, free from any impediments, free from any dominance of any single country, and trade happens as freely as possible through the waters of Bay of Bengal, right? So it's easy to remember those countries whose interest lies in the Bay of Bengal remaining, free for navigation and trade are countries that lie on its coast: Bengal, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand. And along with these littoral states, you also have Nepal and Bhutan, whose trade also primarily happens through the Bay of Bengal, either through Kolkata or through, of course, India to cross karna hi padta hai, but through the ports of Kolkata or Dhaka. All right. Now, since we're talking about an international association that is focused on the Bay of Bengal, right, it is only fair to imagine that the headquarters would lie in Bangladesh. And so is the case. The headquarters of BIMSTEC lie in Dhaka, Bangladesh, right? So that is BIMSTEC. Again, please read the introduction on the Wikipedia page or maybe the website from the about page. That's going to be, I would say, sufficient for this discussion. Now, if you look at Southeast Asia, ASEAN, very, very important. In fact, one can memorize, 3 or 4 different kinds of groupings if one just knows which 10 countries primarily make up Southeast Asia. All right, and it's easy to remember. So if you imagine this particular geography, this particular part of the world, right, the countries are of two kinds. Geographically, they're of two kinds. The first set of countries would be part of this peninsula that is known as, of course, Indochina, right? Culturally, Indian influence from the west and Chinese influence from the north, right? So, this peninsula that contains countries like Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, these 5 countries are the peninsular countries of Southeast Asia. Similarly, on the south of this peninsula, you have the other set of 5 islands that are Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, this very small monarchical country called Brunei Darussalam, and then further east you have Philippines, right? So 5 peninsular countries and 5 island countries used to be the 10 member states of ASEAN. This year, the 11th state, East Timor, has been added, and it is, it's an island that has its borders with Indonesia. In fact, the island of Timor is divided between East Timor and Indonesia. West Timor technically is Indonesia. ओके सो इस साल एडिशन हुआ है, तो याद रखना करंट अफेयर्स के पर्सपेक्टिव से बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. ईस्ट तिमोर की कैपिटल बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है. द कैपिटल इज कॉल्ड दिल्ली, DILI, and therefore an interesting country. You would also see a difference between these two sets of Southeast Asian countries in terms of the nature of their economy and the nature of their polity, and also maybe in the sense of religion. So, if we divide the peninsular countries and the island countries on some other grounds, let's see what these grounds can be. So, political stability, if you think of, Myanmar doesn't have it. Laos and Cambodia do not have it. Vietnam is under communist rule and therefore is not considered politically very open or politically very progressive. Perhaps the only politically stable slash progressive slash open country in the peninsular Southeast Asia is Thailand. Similarly, if you now look at the economies and the polities of Southeast Asia that are islands, they're far more open, they're far more progressive. Think of countries like Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Right? I'm not saying that they are beacons of political fairness, but compare them to countries like Myanmar, dictatorships or military junta in Myanmar, political history of Laos and Cambodia and even Vietnam, and they are far more open slash democratic. Similarly, if you look at the dominant religion prevalent in the peninsular part of Southeast Asia, across Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, you will see Buddhist influence, or in case of Vietnam, some Chinese, the native Chinese Shinto religion influence. Correct? Whereas in the island members of Southeast Asia, the dominant religion is Islam, right? Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei Darussalam are Muslim countries. Philippines is one exception, it's a Christian country, right? Economically, also, if you look at Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines are far more economically progressive and better doing economies in comparison to countries like Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. राइट सो इस तरह के डिस्टिंक्शन से अगर आपको हेल्प मिलती है याद करने में, सो बी इट. राइट, आप ये एटलीस्ट इन 10+1 नाउ 11 कंट्रीज को याद रखेंगे तो आपको बहुत हेल्प मिलेगी. बिकॉज if I give you a question on which countries together attend the East Asia Summit, so you will be surprised to know that 18 countries together attend the East Asia Summit. Okay, but it's easy to remember if you just know about ASEAN, right? तो ये 10 member countries हो गए. फिर उसके बाद आपको देखना है कि इनके मेजर नेबर्स इन ऑल द डायरेक्शंस कौन कौन से हैं. तो वेस्ट में इंडिया होगा, नॉर्थ में चाइना होगा, ईस्ट में जापान और साउथ कोरिया होगा, साउथ में Australia or New Zealand होंगे, right? And you add the two big bullies of the world, Russia and USA, and you will have the East Asia Summit, right? So again, point is, please try to approach international organizations. You will definitely get one passage on international relations, and it's highly likely, it's very highly probable that this year's passage would be on some international organization slash convention, and which countries are members, which countries are observers. These kind of questions are easily, I would say, can easily be anticipated or expected. So rather than getting confused by the names of these countries, approach it through the medium of these maps, and therefore should be easy, is my expectation. All right. So with respect to ASEAN, just take the discussion forward, and complete this task of marking which countries attend the East Asia Summit, and which countries together have signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. That is the world's largest free trade agreement, and it does not have the United States in it, right? So RCEP is very important. India was an initial signatory, but right before it was to come into effect, India backed out of this free trade agreement, right? So RCEP is simply ASEAN plus its neighbors, India, China, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. ये 16 कंट्रीज ने मिलकर डिसाइड किया था. फिर इंडिया बैकड आउट, तो आज 15 कंट्रीज हैं, राइट? सो इसीलिए द सेंट्रलिटी ऑफ आसियान कैन नॉट बी emphasized more than what I have already done. Okay, so with this, we are now left with just one final major international organization of relevance for us, which is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, right? So अगर सार्क साउथ एशिया की ग्रुपिंग है, आसियान साउथ ईस्ट एशिया की ग्रुपिंग है, आपने अफ्रीकन यूनियन के बारे में आज थोड़ा बहुत देख लिया, आपने यूरोपियन यूनियन के बारे में देख लिया, आपने मर्कोसुर देख लिया, आपने EFTA देख लिया, आपने EU देख लिया, यूरेशियन इकोनॉमिक यूनियन देख लिया, right? So finally, Sirf, although we can, continue this discussion further, but I have to respect the time that's left and the topics that need to be covered additionally, right? So we won't be covering Gulf Cooperation Council, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, these kind of, other bodies, but only the ones that were in the news this year specifically, right? So SCO, if you look at the membership, right, it's primarily a Central Asian grouping which has been expanding its scope and its membership in the recent years, right? So SCO के member countries कौन-कौन से होंगे? It's again not very difficult to imagine if your geography game or map, your idea of relative position of countries is fairly decent, right? So you would have countries like Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. It's always beneficial to just remember these four Central Asian countries. I think I should open a better map. I can't navigate as easily here. Let me show you the SCO membership. Right, this should be more clearly visible, right? So we start with Central Asia, the initial original members of SCO. So these four countries together, right? India ke sar ke just upar, right at the top of the head of India, the crown of India, you have Tajikistan. Easy to memorize why the mnemonic ki sar ke upar Taj hota hai. So just above, this juncture where Afghanistan, India, and China they intersect. Although this is not an appropriate map, इसमें पाकिस्तान occupied कश्मीर को पाकिस्तान में दिखाया गया, but it's an international map and we can't argue with it. But we will consider Gilgit-Baltistan, of course, to be Indian territory, and therefore, where the borders of Afghanistan, India, and China meet, right at the top of it, you have Tajikistan. Right at the top of India's head, you have Tajikistan. Above it, there are two intersecting and very strongly, interlocking countries. Uzbekistan towards the direction of the US. So again, another mnemonic. US जिस दिशा में है, जिस डायरेक्शन में, उसी डायरेक्शन में उज्बेकिस्तान भी है. फिर दूसरा है कोरिया की तरफ. KYR स्पोर्ट्स मैचेस जब होते हैं कोरिया के, तो KYR is a very common acronym that is used. तो इस तरफ किर्गिस्तान है. right? Uzbekistan towards US, that is towards the west, Kyrgyzstan towards east in the direction where Korea is. And above them is the biggest Central Asian country, which is difficult not to be memorized. It is Kazakhstan, right? If you watch the movie Borat, you would understand which country am I talking about, right? Kazakhstan. So these four Central Asian countries, along with two strategic partners, Russia and China, so they together started, the reason why SEO came into existence was that after the disintegration of USSR, a lot of militant groups and separatist groups had become active in Central Asia, right? So the primary objective of these countries coming together was to deal with the security issues at hand back then, 1990s, right? Late 1990s. So mid and late 1990s. So in order to tackle these security challenges, because Xinjiang province of China falls here, it was even like a very major concern for China, right? China, Russia, and these four Central Asian countries came together. The primary focus was security alliance for regional separatist groups and militant groups. But later on, after this objective was completed substantially, they realized that owing to the greater significance, both military as well as economic, of China and Russia, they could invite other countries to the board. They could invite other countries to the table and present a strategic alternative, if not a challenge, to a grouping like the G7, right? So, agar BRICS is a forum of developing countries to the G7, right? Then the SCO is a forum, is a grouping that is a security slash strategic challenge to the G7 or the Western Alliance. It's not an alliance. I can't say that this is an alliance that in case the US and China go to war, the Indian government would necessarily have to side with the Chinese. That's necessarily not the case, right? But it is as close to having a security, arrangement as one can imagine, under the strong leadership initially of Russia and China, and now also India. So, from these four Central Asian countries plus Russia and China, how does the membership expand? I always tell you, try to memorize in pairs, right? And the next pair would be India and Pakistan as the first pair to join it. And the next pair would be Iran. And right, if you look at the latitude right above Iran, there is this very strong ally of Russia known as Belarus, right? So ये countries आज SCO के member countries हैं. Please remember, Mongolia, which is sandwiched right between Russia and China, is not a member of SCO. It has an observer status, but it's not a member. अब SCO क्यों न्यूज में था? Because Tianjin में summit हुआ था. Mr. Modi went and attended this session this year. The pictures of which, of course, all of you would have already seen. Prime Minister Modi being, met and greeted by, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. So that is the significance of SCO. And remember, this is something you should do for yourself. That every year SCO conducts two primary summits. One is the heads of state summit. The other is the heads of government summit. राइट सो आपको ये देखना है कि इस साल हेड्स ऑफ स्टेट समिट कहाँ हुआ. आई ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू. हेड्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट समिट कहाँ पर होगा? इट्स येट टू बी कंडक्टेड. सिमिलरली लास्ट ईयर हेड्स ऑफ स्टेट समिट कहाँ हुआ था और हेड्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट समिट कहाँ हुआ था और नेक्स्ट ईयर कहाँ पे होंगे. फॉर ऑल दीज समिट्स दैट यू कवर, फॉर एग्जांपल G20, ब्रिक्स, यहाँ पे तो आप, आई ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू कि नेक्स्ट ईयर कहाँ होगा, बट ऑल्सो लुक एट द लास्ट फ्यू समिट्स वेयर हैव दे बीन कन्वीन्ड एंड कंडक्टेड. ओके. इसके साथ ही साथ इनका एक परमानेंट ऑफिस है विच इज कॉल्ड रैट्स, द रीजनल एंटी टेररिज्म स्ट्रक्चर. It is headquartered in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and I somehow find this very funny that despite not being a military alliance, these countries have joint military exercises with each other under the aegis of RATS, that is the regional anti-terror structure. That the joint armies of India, Pakistan, and China would be undertaking military exercises in some form, indirectly, indirect or indirect format, under the TATS executive committee, right? So this is interesting and therefore is important. Just note the official languages of SCO. It's not English, right? It's just Chinese and Russian. right? That's all. So this is it for the international organizations. We've covered substantial uh, number of topics, right? We've covered substantial information. If you look at the sheer size of what can be asked in terms of questions from these topics. So from here we move on to the next set of topics that we can discuss, and that is developments related to sports this year. Okay, so first and foremost, right? Of course, the Indian women's cricket team has won the ODI World Cup this year. Everybody knows that, right? So, apart from that, you should also know that in the backdrop, very silently, India's hockey federation and India's hockey team celebrated 100 years of coming into existence, of their coming into existence, right? So, Indian hockey's centenary celebrations to kick off on November 7th. So, this is very, very recent. And when we are talking about, remembering, recognizing, and celebrating the glorious history of hockey in India, which is called by many but legally not the national sport of India, right? You have to also look at the achievements of India men's national hockey team, at least, right? You can additionally also cover female, the women hockey teams, field hockey teams achievements, but at least India men's national field hockey teams achievements मस्ट बी कवर्ड, राइट? और इसमें कुछ फैक्ट्स बहुत ही ज्यादा स्टैगरिंग है, इसमें कुछ फैक्ट्स अनबिलीवेबल लग सकते हैं, बट दे आर ट्रू, एंड दैट हैज बीन द ग्लोरियस हिस्ट्री ऑफ हॉकी इन इंडिया, जिसमें सबसे माय पर्सनल फेवरेट इज that right from India's first appearance in the Olympics in 1928 right up to the final of the 1960 Olympics, which India unfortunately lost to Pakistan, India remained undefeated at the Olympics and won, of course, all the gold medals. Right? So you can see in 1928, the team won its first Olympic gold medal, and until 1960, the Indian men's team remained unbeaten at the Olympics, winning 6 gold medals in a row. Okay, the team had a 30-0 winning streak during this time from their first game in 1928 until the 1960 gold medal final, which they lost to Pakistan. Right? So you should remember at least these facts, that India has won the Olympic gold medal in men's field hockey 8 times, out of which 6 times it was, in a row. So 1928 to 1956 it was consecutively. 1960 India lost. Then 1964 again India won, and then finally 1980 was the last Olympic gold medal that India has won. Okay. उसके बाद India has won the Hockey World Cup once in 1975, 4 times Asian Games, and 4 times Asia Cup, right? But at least आप World Cup और Olympic Games की Indian hockey team के achievement को याद जरूर रखें. और उसके साथ ही साथ, it goes without saying, of course, easy to anticipate, easy to guess also. The top scorer for India's men's hockey team, of course, is the legendary Major Dhyan Chand, right? And most caps is Mr. Dilip Turkey, who's currently also the head of Hockey India Federation, Indian Hockey Federation. Sorry, it's called Hockey India today, just Hockey India. Okay, so this would be enough for hockey. But while you are at it, I will give you one more interrelated topic to cover with this. Just read about the names of the winners of the Major Dhyan Chand National Sports Award this year. There are 4 winners, और जहां भी आपको 3 या 4 ऑप्शंस दिखते हैं, 3 या 4 कोई सेट्स ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन दिखती है, you should anticipate, you should guess or expect to get a question, right? और वो question किस तरह का होगा? Which of the following was not amongst the awardees of the Major Dhyan Chand Sports Award this year, right? Lifetime Achievement Award. Okay, so look at the 4 winners and just remember their names very, very correctly, clearly, accurately. Which sport do they represent? And also look at previous years, may just a very quick overview of who all, like which Indian athletes and sports persons have been bestowed with this very significant national honor of Major Dhyan Chand Award. Okay, so this should be sufficient for India's hockey, 100 years, 100 glorious years of hockey in India. Okay, next. Now, this is a news that everybody is quite aware of. Everybody has even celebrated this news in their own capacity and manner, right? So, CLAT का अगर आप template देखोगे, history देखोगे, format देखोगे, so they love to ask questions from areas that were already very widely discussed nationally and internationally, as I was just mentioning. Okay, so उसके लिए you can refer to this particular link. It has included some, FAQs on India's successful, women's ODI campaign. Uh, Questions like, first and foremost, of course, India hosted this year's Women's World Cup. No brainer, easy to answer. But how many teams participated in this year's edition? 8 teams did. Which country won? India did. Which was the last team to win the ICC Women's ODI World Cup 2022? Answer would be Australia. Next, who was the captain of India? Harmanpreet Kaur. You are all aware. Next, which player won the Player of the Tournament award in this tournament? Some of you may not know. Deepti Sharma. Next, how often is this tournament held? आपको options मिलेंगे every 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. So शायद थोड़े confuse हो जाओ, but it is every 4 years, right? First Women's World Cup, Cricket World Cup, was held in which year? So you may feel that women's cricket is only gaining recognition and popularity in recent years, but make no mistake, the first Women's World Cup was held back in 1973. Okay, then name of the top scorer this year, which Indian bowler took the most number of wickets, also was the player of the match in the final, right? Final किस venue पे खेला गया, किस stadium में खेला गया? So it was the DY Patil Stadium in Navi Mumbai, right? How many times has India hosted this World Cup before? 3 times. And very importantly, some of you may not know, who was the head coach of the Indian women's cricket team? Answer would be Amol Mazumdar. Okay, so these kinds of basic one-liner facts with respect to India's campaign and the glorious end to the ICC Women's World Cup. These kind of questions, lesser known, lesser thought about or researched about kind of questions, one should expect, right? So this is with respect to ICC Cricket World Cup Women's Edition. Next is, I deem this more important than the previous two topics that we have covered for getting a passage, an entire passage in CLAT, and also several questions, both direct as well as indirect, right? In CLAT as well as ALET, right? So make no mistake, this is an equally important topic for both the exams, right? Because the information that can be tested is thick enough for you to get a passage on it, right? And it's nationally significant. It was in the news for for its own unique reasons, right? So I'm talking about the World Para Athletics Championships, which were hosted in India in this year 2025, right? This is not the Paralympics. We are not talking about the Paralympics committee conducting this tournament. No, we're talking simply about the World Para Athletics Championships. That is a distinct tournament that is conducted by the World Para Athletics, a subcommittee of International Paralympic Committee. ओके, सो ये इंट्रोडक्शन यहाँ से पढ़ लेंगे और उसके बाद सीधा हम आ जाएंगे दिस year's edition that was hosted in India. Just a sec. Yeah. So 2025 World Para Athletics Championships held in New Delhi, right? Which stadium was it held in? The Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, right? This was the first time the event was hosted in India as well as also in South Asia. Okay. Next, what was the official logo and mascot for this event? So question आ जाता है इस पे. The mascot is called Viraj. Okay. uh, which is a spirited young elephant with a blade prosthesis, a tribute to strength, optimism, blah blah blah. Not so relevant. Just remember the name of the official mascot of this event. It is Viraj. Okay. Then the medals tally, right? So India outperformed itself. It was, it really gave an inspiring performance at this championship by being by being ranked the 10th country in the final medal table or medals tally of this tournament. So remember, the first country was Brazil, second was China. India is 10th with 6 gold medals. If you can't remember how many silver and bronze medals did India win, it's all right. Just try remembering the number of gold medals that India won and the number of total medals that India won, right? So it is 22 total, 6 gold medals. And when the number is less than 10, right? So one can expect getting questions on who were the winners of these 6 gold medals. That's your task. Please find out the names of the para athletes who won the gold medal at this particular tournament. India was ranked 10th. Please remember, this is very, very important. Okay. Thereafter, yeah. इससे पहले कहाँ हुआ था 2024 इट हैपेंड इन कोबी इन जापान. वहां पर परफॉर्मेंस कैसी थी? आई डोंट थिंक दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इंडियन एडिशन ही जब रिसेंटली हुआ है तो आई थिंक ज्यादातर क्वेश्चंस वहीं से आएंगे. सो लुक एट द पार्टिसिपेशन इन दिस ईयर्स वर्ल्ड पैरा एथलेटिक्स चैंपियनशिप्स. हाउ मेनी कंट्रीज एंड हाउ मेनी एथलीट्स इन टोटो वर पार्टिसिपेटिंग, सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. ओके. सो इससे रिलेटेड भी आपको जैसे आईसीसी विमेंस ओडीआई वर्ल्ड कप के FAQs के फॉर्म में, वन सिंगल लाइनर्स के फॉर्म में क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर्स गिवन है. You should make similar kind of notes and expect similar kind of questions under this particular heading, which frankly is very important. 2025 World Para Athletics Championships. Okay, moving on from Para Athletics Championships to this recent declaration that Ahmedabad will officially host the 2030 Commonwealth Games. Okay, so this is very recent and we really don't know too much about which kind of events and sports will be included in this edition of the Commonwealth Games. But at least just remember 2030 Commonwealth Games, in which city? Ahmedabad. And then the one previous Commonwealth Games that India has already hosted in New Delhi, the highlights of those Commonwealth Games, right? So again, who were the gold medal winners, right? Which stadiums and which kind of events featured in those Commonwealth Games? You can very briefly just cover that topic. Honestly, not as important to get a passage in CLAT on this topic, but you can expect a remote question in an exam like ALET on Commonwealth Games. Okay. Lastly, India is currently vying for getting the hosting rights of the 2036 Summer Olympics. ये ALET के लिए ज़्यादा important है कि officially 2036 के host अभी decide नहीं किए गए हैं, but India is one of, I believe, the final 2 contenders that are vying for the hosting rights of these Olympics, right? So India, and I think the other country is Saudi Arabia, also Doha. Okay, there are several countries in the fray, so no need to memorize all of them. Potential ways. Okay, just remember India is vying for a bid of 2030 six Summer Olympics. और उसके साथ साथ just look at where are the previous editions going to be held. So 2032 is going to be Brisbane, that is final. Then before that, it's going to be in the US, Los Angeles, 2028, right? और साथ ही साथ विंटर ओलंपिक्स अगर आप देखना चाहें, although not very important, I don't want to burden you guys with unnecessary facts that I expect you to remember. But at least Summer Olympics का एक idea आपको होना चाहिए. And also, very importantly, read about the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, as a body that oversees the conduct of and the management of the Olympic Games across the world. It's very important. They also set standards for athletes to follow in their championships and tournaments. Okay, so 2025 this year they have got a new president, so इस हिसाब से एलिट के लिए शायद थोड़ा सा relevant question बन सकता है that who has been appointed as the new president of the International Olympic Committee. Answer is Miss Kirsty Coventry. Okay, so again in the notes that we will provide you, you will get this comprehensive list of most important appointments, both national as well as international, most important awards that have been given, right? So such kind of factual information that doesn't require much discussion but has to be read and memorized. So you will find it all compiled in the notes that we will be sharing with you, provided again a reminder that you register on the Google form link that is there in the description of this video. And within, I would say, 2 to 3 days, you'll get all the relevant material for your preparation. Okay, so this I would say is the first set of major sporting events, at least from the last 3 4 months. In the next two sessions, if there's some other sporting related development that we need to cover, we'll do that. Right? Given that in today's session we have laid additional emphasis, extra emphasis on international affairs and international organizations, the thrust on this topic is going to be less in videos 2 and 3, right? So international organizations पे तो जितना discussion होना चाहिए था या हो सकता था, I think वो हमने यहाँ पे कर लिया है. But इससे आगे फिर कुछ बस major conventions जो कि news में थे cyber security से related, वो हम video number 2 और 3 में कर सकते हैं. बाकी video number 2 and 3 will focus more on science and technology and environment and ecology, right, than international affairs and relations, and also thoda bahut on polity. Okay, also I was told that if this video reaches a certain number of likes, which is currently at 9. Okay, so if by the end of this series, right, which we hope to, we've got the 10th like as soon as I mentioned this, thank you. But as soon as we, finish the third lecture in this series, which will be hopefully by the mid of next week, if in that final video we have received around 50 odd likes in that final video, that shows the reach is increasing, we will also present on back-to-back days a similar series on the most important legal developments, where we'll see the recently passed legislations in any of the videos. If the number of likes exceeds 50, let's say, we will also bring out a series on legal reasoning, where very quickly in, I would say, 3 + 3 hours के 2 सेशन हम बैक टू बैक कर लेंगे, मे बी से थर्सडे और वेंसडे और थर्सडे को कर लेंगे, जिसमें मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट्स, लीगल amendments and new laws that have been passed, or some policy related measures that the government of India has introduced, उनको हम कवर कर सकते हैं इसी तरीके से बैक टू बैक. आपने अगर पढ़ा हुआ है तो रिवीजन हो जाएगा, अगर आपने नहीं पढ़ा हुआ तो एटलीस्ट यू विल हैव सम आइडिया व्हाट टू एक्सपेक्ट इन द लीगल रीजनिंग पैसेजेस. ओके, say for example the Supreme Court's judgment in the state of Tamil Nadu versus the governor of Tamil Nadu, followed by a very different kind of response that they've given to the presidential reference on this matter, not curtailing, but setting a timeline for the governors and the president of India to perform their official duties, right? So what's that matter all about? वो सब हमें देखने को मिलेगा in that legal reasoning की series. Okay, so this is sports related developments, major developments, and now we come to these very notes to cover some important events from India's history. Now, again, I would definitely expect a passage to be there in CLAT from Indian history, right? If you look at the template, if you look at the pattern in the previous year's CLAT paper, you will see they'll ask you questions about figures like Gandhi. They'll ask you questions about figures like, B.R. Ambedkar, right? So important historical personalities, the movements and historical events related to those personalities are definitely important from a CLAT perspective, right? History is the other name of general knowledge basically, and you should expect the first passage in CLAT to be from India's history, right? अब उसमें कुछ की थीम्स हैं जो इजी टू एंटिसिपेट हैं, इवन इफ वी कांट कवर ऑल ऑफ देम इन टुडेज सेशन. आई वुड लाइक टू अगेन इंडिकेट what topics can these be, right? So the first and foremost topic would be the 100th year anniversary of the discovery of the Indus Valley civilization, right? It was in 2024, right? So 1924 में हड़प्पा डिस्कवर हुआ था और इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन दुनिया के सामने आई थी. So last year it was a very, very, very important topic that we were hoping, that we were expecting and anticipating to feature in CLAT. Didn't happen, right? But that doesn't take away from this topic the importance that it holds, right? Because we're talking about the earliest stage of India's civilization, and therefore GKK terms mein Indus Valley civilization remains one of the most important topics in any and all entrance examinations for this year and even for the next few years, right? उसके अलावा this year 150th birth anniversary of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was observed and celebrated across India. So he is therefore very important, right? 150th anniversary of of Vande Mataram also was there, right? So similarly, 200th birth anniversary of Dadabhai Nauroji was observed, and 100th year anniversary of the Kakori train action slash, we don't call it robbery anymore. That's what the Britishers used to call it, right? But since our venerated freedom fighters were involved in this act, we prefer calling it the Kakori train action, right? So these kinds of events were in the news for for there being a certain anniversary of these kind of events, and therefore GK वहां से ट्रिगर हो जाता है and they become very important. ओके तो अगर आप सपोज ककोरी ट्रेन एक्शन के बारे में पढ़ रहे हो तो आपको किस एक्सटेंट तक पढ़ना चाहिए, क्या पढ़ना चाहिए? तो सबसे पहले तो आप पढ़ोगे कि ककोरी है कहाँ पर, राइट? वो ट्रेन कहाँ से कहाँ जा रही थी जिसको these people tried to rob, or maybe I would like to call liberate. Okay, but okay, that these people tried to rob. Then what was there in that train that these people were hoping to find and rob from the train? So ये तो बहुत बेसिक हो गया. बट इसके अलावा फिर जहाँ रियल क्वेश्चंस बनने स्टार्ट होते हैं, that who were the four people who were hanged in the Kakori train conspiracy case, because more than, if I remember correctly, around 40 odd people were arrested, right? Some of them were acquitted, some of them were given lesser sentences, some of them were sentenced for life, right? But four people were hanged in the Kakori train action case. Their names are very important. Now, which revolutionary organization, planned and orchestrated and conducted this entire action? It was the HRA, Hindustan Republican Association, who were the founding members, right? And similarly, from HRA to becoming HSRA under the leadership of the great Bhagat Singh, राइट? सो वहां से रिलेटेड टॉपिक्स बनते हुए चले आते हैं. तो आपने देखा ककोरी ट्रेन एक्शन से हमने बात स्टार्ट करी, and we looked at the geography, the place where this happened, what were the motivations, why were these why was this act done. Then from there on, we looked at which organization was associated with this particular event, who were the founding members, who were the people hanged in this case, right? Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Rajendra Nath Lahiri, right? So and then अदर रेवोल्यूशनरीज ऑफ द सेम टाइम, से फॉर एग्जांपल भगत सिंह, उनके बारे में भी फिर हमें पढ़ने का मौका मिलता है, दैट व्हिच एसोसिएशंस स्लैश ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस वाज भगत सिंह एसोसिएटेड विद, राइट? और दैट ही हेल्प्ड फाउंड, और which newspapers slash publication slash magazines did Bhagat Singh used to write in. तो इस तरह के factual questions with that are related to revolutionaries in India. हम अगर क्लैट के पास्ट 4-5 years के क्वेश्चन पेपर्स देखेंगे तो हमें एक चीज देखने को मिलेगी, that there is increasing focus on the non-violent leadership, the political leadership of India during the British rule, right? So there are questions on Dr. Ambedkar, there are questions on Mahatma Gandhi. So one, I would say, unexplored area of India's freedom struggle to this date, from the perspective of CLAT and Elliot, remains the revolutionaries, right? So revolutionaries therefore are very important for one to expect a passage on in this year's CLAT paper. इस साल नहीं आता तो अगले साल. I mean, you the moment you identify these themes, you become very very confident that if not this year's paper, then definitely in around this period of time that we are living in, right? I'm hoping it is this year, but definitely it will come sometime, right? So anything related to revolutionaries is important, especially on the 150th anniversary of the Kakori train action. Similarly, अगर पुराना ही ट्रेंड फॉलो करते हैं, ठीक है, सपोज पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप पे ही फोकस करते हैं, गांधी जी पे पहले ही पूछ चुके हैं, अंबेडकर पे पूछ चुके हैं, तो इस बार सोचो थोड़ा और पीछे चले जाते हैं, दादा भाई नावरोजी पे पूछ लेते हैं, उनकी 200th बर्थ एनिवर्सरी है, या फिर थोड़ी सी जो आई वुड से नॉन ट्रेडिशनल लीडरशिप थी ऑफ द कांग्रेस लाइक सरदार पटेल, उन पे क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं, उनकी 150th बर्थ एनिवर्सरी है. So always try making constellations of topics. Simply अगर 150th किसी historical figure की birth anniversary, तो just reading about them maybe not may not be really sufficient. आपको थोड़ा सा आगे बढ़कर उनके horizontal, उनके vertical जो related entities, persons, events हैं, उनके बारे में पढ़ना पड़ेगा, right? और बहुत smartly पढ़ना पड़ेगा. Nobody is expecting you to read entire books on Indian modern history, right? Just trace these elements, right? Where did the stream of revolutionary activism in India start from, right? Why did it gain traction? What was its relation to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre? Again, another important historical event from this year's CLAT perspective, because a movie, Kesari Chapter 2, was released, which was based on this historical personality called Sir Sankaran Nair, who fought the Jallianwala case, right? So each of these things are related. If you have been following the news and if you are reading about them in isolation, in silos, maybe it won't make as much sense, and maybe you will not be able to foresee कि कैसे इस पे पैसेज आ सकता है और कैसे इस पे वो 6-7 क्वेश्चंस पूछे जा सकते हैं. बट अगर आप थोड़ा सा इनको रिलेट करके पढ़ते हो, तो फिर आप डेफिनेटली आपके नोट्स भी इस तरीके से बनेंगे, आपका क्वेश्चन बैंक भी इस तरीके से बनेगा, और आपके मॉक्स में भी आपको यही चीज बार बार फीचर होते हुए देखने को मिलेगी, that you will be able to answer those questions very easily, right? Given that just days are left for this final exam, I'm giving you topics. There's ample material available. There's ample resources. Even if you don't rely on our resources, our materials, our notes, still there's ample material available for you to cover these topics from, and you still have sufficient time. I don't think that given the list of topics that we'll be sharing with you, the 100 most probable topics, even if you devote 3 hours on a daily basis to cover, say 25 to 30 topics, right? आप 2 बार पढ़ लोगे, 3 बार रिवाइज कर लोगे before the actual exam. So please don't think कि अभी तक तो यार there are people who have been preparing for CLAT for say 2 years or more, right? तो मैं कहाँ से लास्ट मोमेंट में इतना पढ़ के करंट अफेयर्स और जीके में how can I ace? You can very easily ace, provided you apply your smart strategy and you apply that smart thinking at the time that it matters the most, right? Make these constellations of topics, provide sufficient emphasis on them, and try to read thematically rather than more factually. Okay, Chalo, moving on. This is so we are going to focus on some of the personalities in the news from these notes that we've prepared. Okay, just a second. Yeah. So certain personalities that were in the news आपको सारे नहीं पढ़ने हैं, right? हम तो जैसे ही कोई न्यूज में आता है तो हम अपने नोट्स उस पर बना लेते हैं. But in hindsight, the most important ones definitely are going to be ज्योतिबा फूले and सावित्रीबाई फुले. वो न्यूज में क्यों है? वो न्यूज में इसलिए थी क्योंकि उनके ऊपर एक मूवी आई थी earlier this year, फुले, right? Which created its own fair share of controversies because of the sensitive subject of caste being involved, right? So ज्योतिबा फुले एंड सावित्रीबाई फुले के बारे में पढ़ना जरूरी है, also because they are the ideological predecessors of the great Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, right? So again आप इसी तरह से डिवाइड करके देख सकते हो कि अगर प्रीवियस थीम कंटिन्यू होता है तो personalities like Sir Sankaran Nair, दादा भाई नावरोजी, ज्योतिबा फुले एंड सावित्री बाई फुले, ये इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाएंगे. अगर थोड़ा सा ट्रेंड चेंज होता है, हिस्ट्री पे क्वेश्चन पूछते हैं बट रेवोल्यूशनरीज पे पूछते हैं, तो काकोरी ट्रेन एक्शन, भगत सिंह, हिंदुस्तान सोशलिस्ट रिपब्लिकन एसोसिएशन, गदर पार्टी, राइट, कोमागाता मारू इंसिडेंट, ये सब फिर ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाएंगे. बट फिर भी आई थिंक आपके पास इतना टाइम है कि आप दोनों को पढ़ सकते हैं और इजीली रिवाइज कर सकते हैं. Okay, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is, for any examination pertaining to law, is forever important, right? तो भले ही पहले क्वेश्चंस आ रखे हों, ठीक है, आपको फिर भी पढ़ना है क्योंकि यू कांट थिंक कि इस बार क्वेश्चन शायद नहीं आएगा, राइट? तो डॉक्टर बी आर अम्बेडकर रिमेन्स इंपॉर्टेंट. और ये न्यूज में क्यों थे? क्योंकि दिस ईयर हिज बर्थ एनिवर्सरी 14th of April has been designated a national holiday, राइट? तो पहले सिर्फ 2nd अक्टूबर, in addition to 15th August and 26th January, हम नेशनल हॉलीडेज सेलिब्रेट करते थे. बट अब इस साल से डॉक्टर बी आर अम्बेडकर की बर्थ एनिवर्सरी भी उसी श्रेणी में, उसी कैटेगरी में आ गई. So this is why he was in the news again, and he remains in the news, right? Every year, it's impossible for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his legacy to not be in the news, right? Especially for lawyers and law students. Then Swami Vivekananda, okay, I don't think in hindsight it's as important a topic now, but if you have the time and the bandwidth to study him and basic facts about him, please do that, right? Then V.D. Savarkar also was, when he was in the news, seemed like very important, but in hindsight, again, I would rate it as relatively less important from an examination point of view. Then Bhagat Singh, Ajit Singh, who was Bhagat Singh's uncle, and other prominent revolutionaries of Punjab. सो रेवोल्यूशनरी मूवमेंट भी आप देखोगे इंडिया में तो दो प्रोविंसेस में अलग अलग तरीके से इट वाज इवॉल्विंग एंड इट वाज टेकिंग शेप. बंगाल के रेवोल्यूशनरीज अलग थे और पंजाब, आई मीन अलग थे से मेरा मतलब ये नहीं है दैट दे हैड डिफरेंट ऑब्जेक्टिव्स or that they didn't share a common platform, but the manner in which these revolutionary activities evolved and the local motivations or the local factors that led to the rise of their activities, right, were very different in Punjab in comparison to Bengal, right? So we will, for this year's paper, focus. It will be more prudent for us to focus on the revolutionaries of Punjab. Okay, and then of course, Mr. Gandhi, again, as important a figure for any entrance examination, let alone a law-related entrance examination, as Mr. Ambedkar. ओके, आप नेक्स्ट देख सकते हैं, इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन हैज बीन मेंशन्ड. इस पे भी नोट्स हैं, हम यहाँ से भी पढ़ सकते हैं. Then this year, Kumbh and other, Kumbh fair was conducted with much pomp and with much, I would say, devotion, right? And therefore, understanding not just the Kumbh fair, but also similar religious fairs, not maybe of the same magnitude or scale, but at least a substantial magnitude or scale, उनको हम एक टेबल के फॉर्म में ही सारी इंफॉर्मेशन यहाँ पे हमने प्रोवाइड करी होगी, that you can then prepare from. Say for example, if I just very quickly scroll down to where the notes on the Kumbh fair is, Kumbh fair are. Yeah, Kumbh and other religious fairs. So, how has the Kumbh Mela evolved? What are the astrological and cultural features? What are the rituals involved in the Kumbh fair? और finally उसके साथ साथ यूनेस्को's intangible cultural heritage list में what kind of intangible cultural elements of India are included, and finally important fairs of India, उनकी एक brief आपको आउटलाइन यहाँ पे मिल जाएगी. इनमें से किसी को भी बहुत डेप्थ में नहीं पढ़ना है, बट अगेन एज आई वाज जस्ट मेंशनिंग, मेकिंग अ कॉन्स्टलेशन ऑफ टॉपिक्स, स्टडिंग अबाउट एवरीथिंग दैट इज रिलेटेड टू द न्यूज एट हैंड, दैट इज गोइंग टू बी आवर अप्रोच. दैट शुड बी द अप्रोच, राइट? अगर शुरुआत से आपकी अप्रोच रही है, you should feel pretty confident about your attempt already, but अगर नहीं रही है, I still would say you have time, do that. Okay. After that, history of India-Pakistan wars and military operations. Again, ऑपरेशन सिंदूर होता है, तो दो चीजें इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाती हैं समझनी कि इमीडिएट फैक्टर्स क्या थे, राइट? वो तो आप सबको अब पूरा इंडिया जानते हैं विजय फैक्टर्स क्या थे. बट व्हाट काइंड ऑफ डिफेंस टेक्नोलॉजीज वर यूज्ड बाय इंडिया अगेंस्ट पाकिस्तान इन ऑपरेशन सिंदूर, ये करंट अफेयर्स पर्सपेक्टिव से ये इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है. और उसके अलावा फिर व्हाट इज द हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान कन्फ्लिक्ट, पास्ट में कब कब वॉर्स हुई हैं, उनमें कौन से मेजर ऑपरेशंस हुए हैं, राइट, उनके मेजर इवेंट्स के बारे में यहाँ पे वो समरी आपको मिल जाएगी. Then the three battles of Panipat and Battle of Karnal, I would say in hindsight, you can skip it. Jhumar dance also you can skip. Sarhul festival also you can skip. Right. So this is not the index that we'll be sharing. The index of the 100 most important topics is going to be different. But from this link, we will not be removing the other topics that I mentioned. So just look at the index and see कि ये notes में कौन-कौन से और वहाँ से आप वो prepare कर सकते हैं. That's how I would suggest that you proceed. Then this list, when further expanded till July and later on also till November, you'll see that there are more topics like, Sir Sankaran Nair as a personality gets added. Then Bhagavad Gita, Natya Shastra and UNESCO Memory of World Register. This was in the news again. UNESCO बहुत ज़्यादा न्यूज़ में है. अगर यूनेस्को की हर रिपोर्ट या हर इनिशिएटिव को जो इस साल उन्होंने न्यू लॉन्च किया है, एक एक क्वेश्चन भी क्लैट में दे दोगे आप, तो पैसेज बन जाएगा इजीली. तो यूनेस्को बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, इसलिए आज की डिस्कशन वहीं से स्टार्ट करी थी हमने, राइट. देन द पोप, his election, it's essentially an election and subsequent appointment, the process, what is it and what's the history of this institution, right, and then facts about the person who is now the pope, right. These elements, these aspects are important. Then prime minister's visit to Sri Lanka, इसको separately नहीं पढ़ना, आपको basically PMO की website पे, if you can very quickly just trace the prime minister of India's visit to various countries this year, make a table और सिर्फ एक लाइन में आपको लिखना है what were the major outcomes. So if for example Sri Lanka prime minister Modi's visit, उसमें दो key highlights थी, his visit to Sri Anuradhapura and also the awarding of the highest civilian award of Sri Lanka to Prime Minister Modi, right? So key outcomes of the foreign visits of Prime Minister of India सिर्फ एक टेबल में समराइज करके पढ़ना है, बहुत ज्यादा डेप्थ में हमें नहीं जाना कि okay, what was the day to day schedule of the Prime Minister in each of these countries, right? Then ओके, इंटरनेशनल योगा डे आई डोंट थिंक इज एज इम्पोर्टेंट. इमरजेंसी पे अगर कहीं क्वेश्चन आएगा तो पॉलिटी से रिलेटेड होगा कि क्योंकि सब प्रेसिडेंट रूल भी लगा है मणिपुर में. सो आर्टिकल 352 356 पे क्वेश्चन आने की उम्मीद है, बट वो पैसेज काफी अच्छे से आपको डिटेल्स दे देगा. आई डोंट थिंक कोई फैक्चुअल मेमोरी आपको बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग करनी है विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द टॉपिक ऑफ इमरजेंसी, राइट. नेक्स्ट इज, yeah, this one is important. Prime Minister Modi visited the Gangaikonda Cholapuram temples, right? So, brief history and architectural importance of this temple and the history of the Chola Empire in India. Not as important as the previous topics I've highlighted, but you will find this in the list of 100 most important topics also. Okay, so we have about 5-6 minutes left, and I would want to maybe cover and show you how to approach the notes on somebody like say Bhagat Singh. Okay. Oh, I think that was the other file. Sorry. Yeah. So Ajit Singh, Bhagat Singh, and revolutionaries of Punjab. Right. So Ajit Singh was in the news because since 2021, the Punjab state government has denoted February 23rd. You don't have to memorize this date. It's a state celebration as the Pagdi Sambhal Divas, right? So what do we know about the uncle of Bhagat Singh, Sardar Ajit Singh? His life was marked by peasant mobilization in Punjab international exile, and also his influence on Bhagat Singh. Right now, facts about him: uh, village that he was born in, Khatkar Kala, now in Shahid Bhagat Singh Nagar district, Punjab. He was the younger brother of Sardar Kishan Singh and uncle of Shahid Bhagat Singh. Right, died in Dalhousie, and this is a very peculiar fact about him. Right, and therefore one can expect a question on it and not be surprised at all. Right, so generally they don't ask you questions on the death anniversary of a particular person, but Sardar Ajit Singh died on the very day India gained independence, 15th August 1947. ओके सो इस पर्सपेक्टिव से क्योंकि peculiar है, interesting है, important हो जाता है, right? Then political groupings and organizations that he had founded or that he was associated with. He founded the Bharat Mata Society and later also founded the Indian Revolutionary Association while being in exile, and also was connected with India House and Free India Society networks abroad. I will try to share these notes in a highlighted format with all of you so that the unnecessarily or the less important, unnecessary तो खैर कुछ भी नहीं है, but less important facts और aspects को आप फिर skip कर सको. ओके, अब हम भगत सिंह के टॉपिक पे आ जाते हैं. राइट, सो वन पेज cheat sheet also you will get. Next, Bhagat Singh, right? This year, not a very, I would say, noteworthy edition of his birth anniversary, 118th year, right? But given the kind of ideas that I just gave you, कि अगर revolutionary stream पे focus किया जाता है, तो ऐसा हो नहीं सकता कि भगत सिंह पे question ना आए. Okay, so where was he born? He was born, date is important, 28th September 1907 in Banga, Punjab, that is now in Pakistan. Name of father and uncle. Education was at National College Lahore, which was founded by Lala Lajpat Rai, and therefore he was, despite having his political disagreements with Lala Lajpat Rai, he was extremely, you know, he was extremely close to and respected and venerated Lala Lajpat Rai, and it was again because of this zeal to avenge the death of Lala Lajpat Rai that ultimately Bhagat Singh was convicted in the Lahore conspiracy case and executed. Okay. Next, Jallianwala Bagh massacre profoundly affected him. He was merely 12 years of age, but that definitely shaped his psyche to, to fight the British with all his might and not simply by advocating for non-violent protest, right? Next, this is very important. This is where you would expect questions from, most likely. He joined HRA, the Hindustan Republican Association, in 1924. This is the same association that carried out the Kakori train robbery, right? And he, after the conspiracy basically fizzled out, although they succeeded in the robbery, the amount that they were expecting to, be able to loot from the treasury wasn't as high, and therefore it didn't basically meet its final objectives or the initial objectives that they had, right? So HRA leaders, they had to go into hiding. Most of them were caught by the British. Some of them were also hanged. So the political association of HRA was in shambles, and it is at this time in 1928 that Bhagat Singh reforms it, right? He remodels it by making it Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Now, why does it matter? Because if you look at the objective of HRA, they wanted to, liberate India from British rule and set up a United States of India, right? But by making HRA HSRA, Bhagat Singh and his comrades therefore declared their political ambition of liberating India and making it a country that is more modeled on the Soviet polity than the American polity, right? He also founded this other, grouping that's very important, known as the Naujawan Bharat Sabha in 1926. He was also associated with Kirti Kisan Party, writing in its journal Kirti, and also contributed to this other, I would say, publication in Delhi called Veer Arjun. And these are the pseudonyms that he used: Balwant, Ranjit, and Vidrohi. Major revolutionary acts: the act of killing, you know, J.P. Saunders to avenge the death of Lala Lajpat Rai's death. Then the bombing of Central Legislative Assembly in 1929. They can ask you a question: who was the other revolutionary who accompanied Bhagat Singh in this daring act of bombing the Central Legislative Assembly? Answer would be Batukeshwar Dutt. Okay. उसके बाद he was executed, as we all are aware, on 23rd of March 1931 in the Lahore Central Jail at the age of 23, along with two of his comrades, the names of which all of you, I hope, would know and remember. Right? uh, right, all the other books that he wrote, I think सबसे prominent, his most prominent writing is by I Am an Atheist, right? But he has also written an essay called Vishwa Prem that talks about that, in which a young Bhagat Singh is envisioning a world of equality, justice, and fraternity beyond race or nationality. He has also written this essay called Student and Politics, where he argues that, political awareness is essential for true education. He has written another essay called Communal Riots and Their Solution, wherein he has condemned the religious bigotry and the press's role in fomenting hatred. In fact, if you read this particular essay today, Communal Rights and Their Solution, you will be amazed at, the level of resonance that you will find between what he wrote in this particular essay and between what you are encountering in India today, right? Next, the problem of untouchability. People would often very mistakenly guess that anything relating to untouchability would necessarily have to be from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. That's not the case. The problem of untouchability, written by Bhagat Singh, an essay where he appeals to Dalits to rise and claim their dignity. And also, Bhagat Singh's other major cultural contribution is the propagation of the slogan Inqilab Zindabad. Okay, so very elaborately, you will then see relationship with Gandhi and ideological differences, and a quick list of names people associated with Bhagat Singh and his comrades, and the basic facts summarized at the end. Okay, so this is how we, and also notes on the Gadar party that I was mentioning, very important, revolutionary group that had very high, very strong ambitions around the First World War, but which unfortunately couldn't come to fruition. Okay, so I think we have, if I say, safely covered more than 25 odd topics in today's discussion. Of course, I can't claim that we have been very holistic or, we have covered these topics very, very comprehensively. But that's in fact not the point of these online sessions, the series of online lectures. The purpose is to give you an idea as to what's more relevant and what's not as relevant, and for you to find help in revising, these topics. Okay, so I think it's time. I'll see you guys probably on Monday or Tuesday with the second session in this series, wherein we'll cover a similar number of topics. And in the next session, we'll be focusing more on on environment and ecology, as well as science and technology and defense in comparison to international relations. And in the final session, we'll also focus on the remaining topics like economics, major schemes, major awards, factual information that will be covered in the third session. All right, so thank you for tuning in, and make sure that you register for these notes in through the Google form, the link to which has been shared in the description of this video. All right, thank you.